Aston Martin has had one of the worst weekends in the 2023 season, but it doesn't seem to be that bad for the Silverstone-based squad in the near future, as they're looking to brush off the recent bad performance and focus on the next race. Although they were schooled as to how a car should perform in Barcelona, Alonso has given a very dominant statement about the upcoming race in Montreal, something that could see the dynamic shift to the point of Red Bull's lead being endangered as well. But before we talk about the positive expectations for Aston Martin, we need to make a closer analysis of how the race went down for them in Spain. During the qualifying session, Alonso endured an issue with the floor of his car, and that turned out really badly for him as he started from P9 and had to climb his way through the grid. He wasn't able to climb higher than P6, and while he had an opportunity to pass his teammate Stroll, he played the ultimate teammate game and showed that they're here for the maximum points, one that was unfortunately limited by the lack of performance of the AMR 23. The Barcelona GP is one that takes a massive toll on the tyres, especially in the last two corners where the front left tyre is literally crying to make the nearly full throttle curve. And while the AMR 23 turned out to be a great car that could withstand the pressure of the tyres, with the high downforce requirement of the track not being that big of a challenge for the AMR 23, the Barcelona circuit showed otherwise. Alonso even went to the extent of saying that his team didn't have a plan for the race and they just tried what they thought would work the best without having the actual backup data. As he said, "We're not sure about the degradation. George was so fast on the first stint, when he overtook me, we changed our minds a little bit. We didn't want to run too close to the cars in front and extended the first stint. By doing so, we also extended the second, and we knew our opportunity was in the final 15 laps of the race, but not enough to fight at the front, just to fight the midfield." Furthermore, Alonso went on to add that the team was quite confused in the previous couple of races, and they just had no idea what was going to work for them and what isn't. And while the true pace of the car was very much visible in Barcelona, this is by far where the team wants to settle, as Alonso set a new target: Montreal. This is the race in which Aston Martin is bringing a massive upgrade package for their 2023 Challenger, and when talking about it, Alonso was full of hope that they'll definitely crush the competition and show why they're the dark horse to win at least second place in the Constructors' Championship. Again, let's not forget that even Stroll labelled the AMR 23 as the car that struggled the most in the Barcelona GP, and the car that they were able to complete quite a few passes on in the 2023 season, the W14, seemed like a rocket ship to them. The expectations from the Canadian were high, but the reality was that before they entered the weekend, they hoped they would be the second fastest car, and they turned out to be the worst car if we're not considering Leclerc's pit lane start. Why am I saying these things? Because when Alonso talked about the upgrades in Canada, he labelled them with such great hope that you would think we might see the Spaniard climb on the podium and receive his 33rd career win. But before we go into that, let's see what Stroll had to say about the AMR 23 in Barcelona. "I was expecting us to be the strongest car after Red Bull. I expected that after all the races this year. We just didn't have it. We had a lot of degradation and were struggling with our pace compared to Merc, Ferrari. Red Bull is in another league. We just didn't have the upper hand." Furthermore, he went on to emphasise the degradation problem as the number one issue as to why the car struggled so much in Barcelona. And when he was asked about the explanation of the problems, he said, "Just deg. Mercedes just looked after their tyres really well. It felt like at the beginning of the first stint, when we were in third, I was comfortably just keeping that gap to Sainz, even pulling away from Lewis a little bit. But then, like 5 laps into the race, they just didn't have any deg, and I just felt the tyres dropping off. They seem to have a really good car today." But which aspect can Aston Martin fix before the upcoming race? Obviously, the concept of the car seems to be working wonders, and while they're nowhere near close to the concept of the team that they've mainly drawn inspiration from, the RB18, it's still one of the most complex floors on the grid. And if you think about it, the chassis of the AMR 23 is the one that would be the most suitable to see the RB19's floor being mounted on it. And this was one of the main reasons why Mercedes couldn't install the complex structures of the Red Bull's floor, even though they admitted to inspecting watching it very closely and seeing what could be fitted on the W14's floor. When talking about the upcoming race in Montreal, Alonso was full of hope as he went on to analyse the outcome of the Barcelona GP and then said, "After starting quite far back, I was able to recover, but only up to a certain point. Both Russell and Perez were faster than us today, so there was a lot of work to do." Looking at the constructors, it's true that Mercedes gained some important points, but we again gained points on Ferrari. In Canada, we'll bring more things, and in Silverstone too. It will all depend on which team is bringing updates. Even then, with a normal qualifying, we would have started alongside Hamilton and could have had some better chances. I think it's just one race, and then in Canada, we crushed them. Obviously, the take of Alonso is one that does bring a lot of hope for Aston Martin, but if there's one thing that we certainly know about Alonso, it's the fact that he always loves to hype up before things happen. Not that they're not happening in the first place, quite the contrary, but sending warnings about an upgrade that is yet to be mounted and tested on the car is quite risky, because you could easily become the laughingstock of the sport in the span of one race. Aston Martin has seemed to be the only car to have the pace to challenge Red Bull in the first couple of races due to the similarity of the car's designs. But even with such similarities, the car was far from where they wanted it to be. Obviously, it's a good aerodynamic basis to work on, and early in the season, Alonso has hinted that the AMR23 will change for around 80% of what we currently see, which then again shows that this is just a fraction of their performance and they'll have a proper shot to win at least one race in 2023. Another fact that goes well in their favour is the wind tunnel time, which they've had plenty of because they finished 7th in the Constructors' Championship last year, tied with Alfa Romeo. Now that the team is starting their own wind tunnel in Silverstone and has signed a deal with Honda from 2026 onwards, the future is bright for the Green squad, but is it enough to crush their competition in 2023? They certainly have the right driver for this narrative, with Alonso being the unsung hero of the team, scoring podiums in all but 2 races this season, with his home race being the second one. But is this car capable of giving him the performance he needs? If we are to judge by Mercedes' newest upgrade package, there's a high possibility that the green Red Bull will shed a couple of tenths of a second advantage to Red Bull, and if this turns out to be the case, then we're likely to see a very competitive and different version of the AMR23, even better than the one now. But with how Verstappen has been schooling the rest of the grid, and with the newest upgrades of the SF23 and the W14, it doesn't seem that the mission of Aston Martin to be the best of the rest outside of Red Bull's dominance is going to be an easy one. Again, there's an intra-team issue that they need to tackle, with Stroll's inconsistency being a massive factor in how the team should perform in the remainder of the season. What doesn't seem to be a hurdle for Aston Martin, though, is the development of the car, as Lawrence Stroll might see his wish fulfilled sooner rather than later, seeing one of his drivers, likely Alonso, step on the highest place on the podium as soon as Canada.